Now, speaking of Richard Marles, when he's not handing his homework to Beijing to double check, he uses Anzac Day to go low on the government. What a classless, dopey individual this bloke is, who wants to be the Deputy Prime Minister of the country. Roll the tape.
If there is a Chinese military base in the Pacific, Australia at that moment is less safe. And the fact that we find ourselves asking these questions in this moment says everything about the failure of Scott Morrison in his managing of the relationships in the Pacific, and specifically Scott Morrison's failure to manage the relationship with Solomon Islands. Because of Scott Morrison's failures, Australians are less safe.
Rowan, what a low piece of work that supposedly Anzac Day is a day where you're not supposed to go there, but he decided to go there and double down, and of course all the media ran it at 6 p.m. tonight.
Yeah, you would have thought a politician would be classier than to use the Anzacs to attack each other. But seeing as Richard Marles has opened the door, I'm going to go one lower, just for his sake. If any Anzacs were to come back to life and look at the last 2 years and see footage of Australians being pummeled into the pavement, being shot at with rubber bullets, little old ladies being strangled and choked and tasered, men having their heads caved in with rifle butts, shots being fired, children terrified, women in their pyjamas being hijacked by the police. If you showed that to some diggers and said, this is the Labor Party of Victoria in the year 2021, they would weep. They would weep tears that their sacrifice was in vain. So many times today we heard, and you mentioned it at the beginning of your excellent editorial, Paul, that today is the day we celebrate and remember the sacrifices made for our freedoms. Well, let's also add into that then, let's remember the freedoms we lost over the last 2 years. Yeah. And let's hear our politicians vow that we will never, ever, ever again in this country see the scenes we saw and never lose our liberties and freedoms again as we did for 2 years. And still in WA, they still are.
Well, and never forget, today in WA is a ticketed-only event. 12 months ago in Melbourne, diggers had to stand behind wire fencing to be able to have a look at the Shrine of Remembrance. And 2 years ago, we were standing in our driveways. That's the fair dinkum reality of the past couple of years. But let's keep going on Richard Marles and China. Amanda Rishworth gave an interview today. She's a Labor frontbencher, and she says, nothing to see here. You know, you can hand your homework to China. That's fine.
Have you got a China problem, though, with Richard Marles?
Look, not at all. Not at all. Richard's been very, very clear around his position on a more aggressive, assertive China.
Who believes this rubbish, Mark?
Well, it's pretty bad that you would hand over a speech to the Chinese embassy and then take it off your website, and it took a Liberal senator in Victoria to publish it so the Australian people knew what Richard Marles was saying about these vital issues. In fact, in the speech, he was suggesting closer military cooperation with China. So that in itself is extraordinary. But Paul, the other big comment today was Peter Dutton saying we've got to prepare for war with China. Well, you know, the great American President Teddy Roosevelt said in foreign policy, speak softly and carry a big stick, meaning have careful statements, but if anyone attacks you, have a big stick to knock them away. Where is the preparation if this is the case? The budget last month had a mild increase in defence spending, mainly for cyber security, supposedly going to 2% defence spending as a proportion of GDP. If we're preparing for war, shouldn't that be 10 or 20%?
Yep.
You know, I found Peter Dutton's comments to be over the top. And instead of speaking softly and carrying a big stick, Dutton is lurching around like a closing time drunk with a megaphone, and he's carrying a toothpick against China.
Mark.
I mean, we've got to start to get this rhetoric
Paul,
into scale instead of the silly talk not supported by major increases in defence capability. Like, if we're preparing for war with China, what are we going to hit them with, Paul? The nuclear subs that arrive in 15 years' time? Our superior missile capacity that doesn't exist? Our superior army size and equipment level, which doesn't exist? I mean, we've got to get this into proportion. And both sides, Labor and Liberal at the moment on national security, are putting in a shocker.
Matt, 30 seconds.
Well, it was a fine argument there from Mark, but it was from a false premise. I think Mark might have just looked at the headlines there, but Peter Dutton did not say we need to prepare for war. What he said is the normal quote that is used in these circumstances, that if we want peace, we should prepare for war. So it was a conditional statement. He wasn't saying war's going to be here tomorrow.
We don't want peace,
the federal
mate.
government has lifted defence spending. We are building boats. We are acquiring the nuclear subs. And we have done a much, much better job than Labor on this over the last few years.
Thank you, guys. I'll leave you with the thought of Jane, who just emailed me something good. What happens when you mix red, brown and teal together? Sorry, red, green and teal together? Muddy brown.